Good afternoon, colleagues. Good afternoon, colleagues. I am Veena Singaram. I've had the pleasure of actually engaging with many of you, as I see your names popping up, regarding the use of the mobile feedback app called Initiated that we have created to facilitate feedback-seeking behavior and a narrative constructive bidirectional feedback environment in the clinical training platforms. So as part of the implementation of this feedback tool in our college, we're hosting today the second of 3 faculty development workshops to foster a culture of constructive feedback in our College of Health Sciences. If you would like to access this app, to use it in your training spaces or disciplines with your students, please let me know. I'll be happy to share more information with you and we can engage more at the end of the workshop. So today at the South African Committee of Medical Deans, there was further directive from the committee and the colleges of medicine to formalize the implementation of work-based assessments as actually part of a continuous summative assessment for confirmation of competence of our registrars to qualify to sit the exit exam for specialization. This further highlights the importance of creating more formative feedback assessments, environments or culture in our training spaces. And it is very critical for us to look to see how we can optimize the quality and frequency of feedback. At the recent Canadian Medical Education Conference held last month, one of the registrar representatives who did a presentation there actually cautioned against the use of just feedback in the form of tick boxes, which is what they found happened with the implementation of formalizing the work-based assessments and EPAs, and hence made a plea for more narrative feedback about how they are doing and how they can improve their competencies, their skills, their procedures, etc. So as discussed in the previous workshop, it is critical for us as educators to create safe, trusting environments that encourage feedback-seeking behavior and constructive feedback culture. Hence, I welcome you all and thank you for your participation in this important workshop. I'm also extremely delighted and honored to extend a really special welcome to Professor Subha Ramini, once again to our UKZN platform. I know I've introduced Subha in our previous workshop, but just for the newcomers for today, Professor Subha Ramini is an associate professor of medicine at Harvard Medical School. She's a general internist and an educationalist. Subha completed her master's in medical education at the University of Dundee and a PhD in health professions education at Maastricht University. At Brigham and Women's Hospital, her leadership roles include faculty lead for global perspectives and community at the Brigham Education Institute, director, program for research, innovations and scholarship to the Department of Medicine, and director of evaluation and the scholars in medical education pathway for the internal medicine residency program at BWH. Dr. Ramini is a member of the AME Executive Committee, that's the Association for Medical Education in Europe, and chairs the fellowship committee and directs the ESME CT course. She's recognized internationally for her faculty development initiatives and scholarship, and has produced several peer-reviewed publications in medical education journals and scholarly interests. And her scholarly interests include mentoring, feedback, clinical teaching, mindset, emotional intelligence, and application of theory to educational practice. Colleagues, as you can see, we're in really great company. It gives me great pleasure to now hand you over to Subha for what I'm sure is going to be another interesting, insightful, and engaging workshop as we learn together about psychological safety, setting the stage for bidirectional feedback conversations. Thank you so much, Subha. Over to you.
Thank you, Veena, and welcome to everybody. Since we are a small, intimate group, the more of you who can turn on your videos, the better it will be, because we are hoping to have a very interactive discussion. But without much ado, let me start. And I'm so glad that we have clinical psychologists who are joining this space, because today is all about psychology. I tell you, it has nothing to do with medical education, and it has a lot to do with human psychology. And so let me start by sharing the first. So today, last time we introduced or redefined feedback and talked about sociocultural interactions that influence feedback conversations. Essentially, we said feedback was a bidirectional conversation, and there are certain things that affect the perceived credibility, because if we don't think the data, the feedback coming back to us is credible, we do not accept it. And if we don't accept it and don't incorporate it, it really is a wasted conversation. With that, let me get started. So we will build on the sociocultural factors that we talked about the last time, and we'll begin with the definition and discuss the importance of psychological safety in promoting a growth mindset amongst trainees. And I know the psychologists amongst us will be overjoyed that we're going to discuss this, focus on this. Emphasize how a safe space can facilitate self-reflection and self-awareness. And we'll discuss some strategies for psychological safety within our own educational space to increase the impact of feedback seeking and acceptance. So this is the definition we are operating under. So feedback should be viewed from a learner perspective. So let's just assume we are teachers and we are talking about learners, but this can be supervisors talking about postgraduate trainees. It can be senior division heads who are talking about the more junior faculty. It can be any one of us. So feedback should be viewed from a recipient perspective. Let me put it that. And it's effective only when it is assimilated in our actions and leads to behavior change. This is the definition. And then we will now go on to three things that really lead to, or rather two things that lead to psychological safety. And I think all three are very important to have a meaningful feedback conversation that actually targets growth, professional growth. So starting with self-awareness, moving on to mindset, and we will finish with psychological safety, which I think needs both self-awareness and mindset. So with self-awareness, I would like to start by asking people, how self-aware do you think we are as senior healthcare professionals and just, advanced trainees, or any of us, any of our disciplines? If you want to speak up or chat, you're most welcome to do either.
Hi, maybe it's Mergen, yeah. So maybe I should get going on this.
Please.
So I mean, I work in the clinical space like most of us here, and I'm involved with both undergrad, postgrad, interns training, and medical officers training. And one of the big problems I have is this sort of unconscious incompetence, this conscious unconscious model. And the dangerous thing about that is the lack of awareness when healthcare professionals manage patients first. So they fail to realize, for example, that it's an area that they don't have knowledge or skill and they need to seek advice. And quite often in our handover rounds, the following day, we have issues where we ask, why don't you pick up the phone and ask your senior? And so the idea of recognizing your limitations seem to be a problem. So I think maybe it's to do with the way we teach as well, because medical school seems to be very assessment focused, and our students tend to focus on passing their assessments, so they get the degree or the module mark, etc., rather than actually fostering sort of critical thinking and questioning and making rational decisions along the way, and discovering rather than sort of ingesting. So, I think this self-awareness, I would say, is very low. And it probably gets better as you get more experience, as I think Visva has mentioned. But I've seen lots of very experienced people who are very poorly self-aware as well, especially in the medical field. So I don't think experience on its own creates that awareness. Thanks.
I think both your comments and Visva's comments are most reasonable because they are actually accurate and borne out by research in this space. And yes, you're right, it does get better. So it's a yes and no answer, which is yes, experience improves self-awareness, but experience alone does not foster self-awareness, because our blind spots are usually when we go wrong. We are much more modest about our strengths. Apparently, this is what psychology research has shown. But then when we make mistakes, we like to blame everything. And I'm fond of saying the dog ate my homework theory. So both comments are very, very valid because there's truth in both. So anyone else want to share this? Share your thoughts about it? Sorry, it sort of, okay. Go ahead and keep chatting. Given the time, I'm just going to move on to this self-awareness. And you may be interested in hearing about the Johari window, which I researched while doing one of my research projects. And it's nothing very fancy. It was written up by two clinical psychologists, and their names are, in fact, hang on a second. Yeah, their names are Joseph Luft and Harrington Ingham, two psychologists. In 1955, they described this model, a model of self-awareness. They really used it primarily in self-help groups and also corporate settings to foster, or at least to raise the question of how self-aware we are. And the model was described as if this is a house with 4 rooms, and each room has a certain peculiarity. But on the top, you see self. So how we perceive ourselves, okay? And then on the left vertical column, you see others. How do others perceive us? So let's mix and match. If we know our behavior, if we are aware, and others also are aware, this is an open window, meaning it's there. It's a beautiful conversation to be had. You know, others know, and they can reinforce or back up our claims of awareness. Moving on to the top right, we are unaware of our behavior, but others can see it. And this is the blind window or blind room. So the only way we can eliminate this blindness is by seeking feedback. And I'm now applying it to the feedback conversation. By seeking and being ready to receive constructive and reinforcing feedback. We may be blind also to our strengths, just to be absolutely clear. Now, moving on to the bottom left, we are aware of a certain behavior, limitation, insecurity, but others are not. Others see the performance, but they don't know what drives the performance. So we hide it. And how can we unhide it? We unhide it if we have a trusting relationship with a mentor, with a teacher, or a peer. And when we acknowledge, oh, I'm afraid, I'm insecure, I'm nervous, I'm anxious, I don't know, I'm not comfortable in this space, then the others know what is driving our performance or lack of good performance, and we can have a conversation about overcoming that insecurity or anxiety. And finally, if you move to the bottom right, there is a space is completely unknown. It's unknown, because neither are we aware, nor are others aware. And one might say, well, isn't this going to be lifelong or permanent situation? Not really. I think in the feedback conversation, the more people whom we open ourselves to feedback, multi-professional feedback, multi-source feedback, then we can shrink to a certain extent this unknown space. And also, as Mergen and Vishwa said, we can experience, and a voyage of self-discovery can also shrink this space. So this is the Johari window of self-awareness, and very, very applicable to feedback conversations and our own professional growth. And you may also be aware, some of you may be aware of the Dunning-Kruger effect, which is actually what Mergen was referring to, unconscious incompetence. So as we are novices in a certain field, and I'm not going to say young or old, a certain field, we are more confident than our competence for the most part. I mean, there are no absolutes, obviously. And then as we get more and more experienced, actually the first thing that falls is the confidence, even though the competence is increasing. But then slowly we come to a steady state where our competence continues to increase, but then we are a little more realistic about our confidence. And that is the Dunning-Kruger effect. So that's about self-awareness. I'm going to stop on self-awareness. Does anyone have a comment or anything to add before we move on to mindset? Today is so much about psychology of the mind.
How do you get a junior doctor to become more self-aware, or a junior person to become more self-aware? Because if they're more self-aware, then they're more likely to appreciate your feedback.
Indeed, it's a very fair question. And Vishwa, the point I think is we have to model self-awareness in a way. For example, if we go through what are we going to do? If you take the Johari window, the hidden column, we can model it as senior educators. We can model it and say, okay, seeking feedback, we can model, and then they will seek feedback as well. And then slowly learn that, oh, I was totally blind to this. And it can be a mix of reinforcing the strengths as well as providing constructive feedback. Similarly, we can model the bottom left, which is the hidden column. Say, when I was in your shoes, I had a great anxiety about this aspect of my performance. And I learned so much from listening or seeking feedback and accepting feedback from a trusted source. So I think modeling may be the only way to actually foster this. But I will say that we are all going to be blind in certain aspects and very, very aware in other aspects of our performance, of our behavior. And over time, this gets better for sure. But then I think the first setting the stage, that's all it's all about today, is us sharing or us serving as role models. And gradually, I think as people learn about their hidden column, they just get better. Any other comments? It's tough.
I'm just wondering.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. I was just wondering, I mean, in addition to modeling, by any chance, can we include this in the curriculum? Is there examples of where perhaps we can teach it in addition to modeling it?
I think psychologists may have the answer to that. But then if you, for example, how can you include it? By having multi-source feedback, by having interprofessional feedback. Because let's say I get feedback from a nurse. They observe or they look at some of my behaviors very different than, say, a physician colleague of mine or a social worker. May, they are so trained in behavioral health and mental health and psychology, and they may look at yet different dimensions of my behavior. Now, if I can collate the feedback from all three of them, and a trusted mentor is reviewing these data with me to facilitate reflection, and this is why people say self-reflection doesn't mean sitting in a dark room and reflecting, because you can just be as blind as without self-reflection, but facilitated self-reflection using data from multiple sources. So you can do that.
Great, thank you. And you also mentioned the beautiful word mentorship. That actually is a great way to shine light on that as well. Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, okay, let's move to mindset. But if people want to go back and offer comments, you're more than welcome. But let me start with this question. How many of you have read about mindset? All of us know what it means, but how many of you have read the work on mindset by Carol Dweck? And if anyone wants to just, start us off on this topic, that would be wonderful. Any of our psychologists in the audience, can you shed some light on this? Because it's entirely your world. And I've only been learning since I started working on my PhD. Well, so when I did my PhD. Okay, Marisa, if your mindset is fixed, it's unlikely that feedback would have any positive effect on you as opposed to open mindset. Okay. All right. So anyone else? That is true. And I will go into just a couple of details. Thank you for getting the ball rolling on that.
Shiva, I'm thinking maybe I could help you out and I could pounce on Suzanne. Suzanne, I know you have thoughts about this matter. Don't you want to share with us?
Yeah, so I was thinking, thank you so much. I do apologize for arriving a little bit late. So I'm a little sad that I missed the intro. So mindset, my current exposure or experience in terms of the concept of mindset has been mostly in conversations or with my peers or seeing colleagues present on it. It wasn't part of any of my training. So I've had to dig a little bit in terms of what is this mindset thing about, and I've come across a lot on conversations about what is a growth mindset, and I always enjoy the idea of it being something where the person creates opportunities for growth and development, and it's based on what their strengths are, and tapping into their resiliencies and etc. So yeah, it's such a pity that we haven't had the opportunity to do quite a bit of reading. Yeah,
Not to worry,
that helps.
Not to worry.
Thank you.
And Rena has also typed in, a fixed mental attitude predetermines a person's responses to interpretation of situation. So I will say this, Carol Dweck, a psychologist from Stanford University, she was the one who originally described mindset based on her ongoing research with children, school children who are faced with difficult problems. She found through her research that a group of children were more energized, more enthusiastic, and continued to work on difficult and challenging problems, regardless of whether they got the answer or not. And another group, they stopped, threw their pens and pencils across the room and exhibited what she called maladaptive behavior because they didn't get at the answer. So based on her extensive research, she described two mindsets, and which was, yes, indeed. And we're going to come to mindset and feedback in a second. And so a fixed mindset group of behavior, I shouldn't say people, we can't label people because we can have different mindsets in different contexts. So when you have a fixed mindset in a certain domain, you think your talent and skill is what leads you to success, which means any constructive or what's perceived as negative feedback is going to drive you into the shell and say, you're wrong, you're insulting my talent. And essentially, it's all about the image I'm projecting to the world. That's a fixed mindset. And when you have a growth mindset, though, what happens is you continue, hard work becomes important, not necessarily getting the answer. Learning becomes important, not necessarily what's the image that others see. And failure is actually seen as another opportunity to learn more. So the mindset, this is how. So when you come to feedback, what does it mean? Growth mindset, I will continue to try hard. And if I don't get the answer this time, it's great. I will learn more, because failure or not getting the answer is an opportunity to learn more and to grow. And effort and attitude determine my abilities. Constructive feedback is sought, welcomed, and received. Totally, or as Rina was saying, and same thing as Visva said. Whereas fixed mindset, you are insulting me, my talent, my skills. My talent is and skills are going to, my basic talent is going to drive me to success. And I don't like to be challenged. And I give up when I'm frustrated. So you do not accept anything that's constructive. That's the sad part. And so if you go back to the Johari window and self-awareness, they are going to have a giant hidden room and also a giant, probably a smaller, a giant blind room and probably a smaller hidden room. Meaning the blind is blindness to our own imperfections or weaknesses, and hidden when you suspect there may be a problem, you just don't acknowledge it. So yes, this is indeed. So you can also look at it this way. If you have a fixed mindset, the goal is to project a positive image. Effort is not valued, successes, images. Reaction to failure is dejection, anger, and giving up. Growth mindset, the goal is to learn and improve. Effort is highly valued. Reaction to failure is excited, try harder because you're going to learn more. So that is a brief voyage through mindset. And if any of you want to, I'll put it in the chat. Well worth reading Carol Dweck's work. Easy reading, very easy to read. And then you will see that she's a psychologist. We need to take so much from the psychology literature because it matters so much in our teacher-learner relationships. So we're not going backwards, although okay. So in order to foster self-awareness and in order to foster a growth mindset, I think psychological safety. So we play a big role, educational leaders, teachers, faculty, staff, senior staff, we should be playing a major role in fostering these two. And psychological safety is critical. And what is psychological safety? Again, Amy Edmondson, a professor at Harvard Business School, read her work if you're interested in this area, and some of you may have already read this, and I'm taking an excerpt. It's a belief that one will not be punished or humiliated for speaking up with ideas, questions, concerns, or mistakes, and the team is safe for interpersonal risk-taking. Because risk-taking, that will lead to more self-awareness, seeking feedback, receiving feedback, accepting feedback, incorporating feedback, and a growth mindset. So it's just a collage from her work on what, and it's called the Fearless Organization. If you, I recommend reading it, bedtime reading, good bedtime reading. Psychological safety is not about praise. That's something, and it's not about being nice. It's not about always saying good things. It's to each other. And so candor is important, but in a safe space. Okay, trust, candor are important, and speaking up are important, and allowing, empowering people to speak up regardless of their opinions, regardless of their fears, regardless of their seniority. So it's for us to establish this psychological safety. So let me actually look at the time. All right, we do have time. So we will do 2 breakout groups. Oh, I missed a chat. Let me look at a chat. Okay. We'll do two breakout groups. And the first group, group 1, in 10 minutes, just think about 3 strategies to promote psychological safety in your clinical teaching environment. And 2 or 3 is okay. Focusing on trainees and focusing from the institutional leadership perspective. What should institutional leadership do? And the second group, just list key elements of fostering a growth mindset for your trainees and why these are important. And we'll have a quick 5-minute report back when we come back. 10 minutes for the breakout, 5-minute for the report back, and then we'll end. So, Ishana, could we do the breakout groups? And as much as possible, each group, please select a group reporter. And if you can turn on your video, that would be lovely, at least in the small groups.
Okay, I'm assigning the group rooms now.
Oh, okay, yes, please. And what I'm going to do is also type. Yeah.
Hi, Subha.
Yes, sorry, Ishana. You were asking me something.
No, I was going to ask you, you're going to move yourself between the rooms?
I was doing that, and I
Okay.
went
No,
in each room.
yeah, I was just going to check that with you,
Yes,
but
I
it's
am.
fine.
Yes. I just typed in each of the chat boxes what the exercises were.
Oh, okay.
Hi, Shana. Can you put me back into room 1? Hi, Ishana, can you put me back to room 1, please?
Yes, I'm trying to get you there. You went into room 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, hold on a second. It's not allowing me to put you back into the room.
You just send what's the name? Send Vina a message that I got pushed out
Kicked
for
out.
some reason. Yeah.
Now I'm trying to put you back, and it's
Not
putting you
allowing.
into a waiting room.
Then from the waiting room into.
Okay, let me put you to room 1. You're going back now?
Welcome back, everyone. And I heard some very lively conversations in both groups. And so we'll start with group 1. And let me see, that's the group where Vina was. And who is the group reporter?
We have 3 people that absolutely wanted to share their ideas directly, Subha.
That's
So we're
fine.
going to go. So we're going to start with actually with Sine. She's actually our College Dean of Teaching and Learning. So we're thrilled to have her in our space, and she's going to start by sharing her thoughts, followed by Marissa and Visva. Thank you.
Okay. Very good.
Did I hear you right? Did you say I was going to
start? Yeah, share your point, and then Marissa. And I must just share, Subha, Marissa is our head of our nuclear medicine department.
No, thanks.
Okay.
We actually started by indicating, of course, we had to introduce ourselves to each other, and most of us were not in the clinical setting. So we decided that we will extend the question to any teaching learning environment, and also any mentor-mentee environment or senior, wherever there are power dynamics in the relationship. And we thought that it's not something that can develop overnight. It's a long-term thing, but it starts with attitudes of the mentor or the senior person in that relationship. Modeling your attitude, the way you communicate, the way you correct, the way you give feedback. Of course, when we tried to put it in terms of the clinical setting, we are aware that there could be things that are so wrong that you need to act there and then. However, even doing that, it should not be in a punitive way, but in a way that says, I care about you as the person making that mistake, and I also care about the person whose life is in danger. So making sure that that kind of feedback is given in a respectful way, and also, but most of the time, feedback should be given in a space that is safe, physically safe, in terms of being away from others. Of course, it's about learning. You are not going to, other people are not going to learn if each time when we want to give feedback, we take a student into the office, but it's the how part of our behavior that helps the next person to feel psychologically safe. That's how we looked at it. I am sure my other colleagues can add from what we discussed. Thanks.
Thank you. So it's modeling by the leaders, by the more senior people, and it's the physical context or physical space in which these conversations are held, and the intent with which these conversations are held, which is the non-punitive space and respectful conversations. Yeah, thank you. So is Marisa going next?
Hi, thanks. I don't have much more to add. I just think it's a process that takes over a long period of time, and that you need to be in the same space with the same people over a period of time, and they get to see you in different situations. I think our students watch us very carefully, so they see how you react to colleagues' criticism or disagreements, and they tend to then decide whether it's a safe space or not. So to me, it's difficult to put it into strategies. It's about demonstrating that you are willing to listen and change, and that you don't judge easily, and that you respect your colleagues. And when people see that over a period of time, then I think it becomes a safe space. I mean, I think you need to show in your discussions and your interactions with colleagues and students consistently that you do not tolerate any sort of bullying or ridicule, and then it becomes a safe space. Thanks.
Actually, you put it very well, because it's structured or deliberate role modeling, and not just doing something, but also being something. And the doing and the being need to be aligned with each other. Totally.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Over a period of time, consistently.
Exactly. But sometimes I'll just add one small corollary to that, because sometimes we are human as well, and we also show impatience, anger. We fall down, if you like, fall from our pedestal, but it's worth debriefing that. Say, this happens, but I acknowledge I just fell off my perch. So, honesty. Thank you. Vispa?
I think the other two speakers have covered most of it, but one thing I want to point out is that I think from the institution point of view, the teaching and training of these soft skills to the trainers, I think, is an important aspect. You know, we've never received this form of education in the past. We receive medical knowledge, but we don't receive this of how to communicate and how to create that safe space for our students. So I think it's something that institutions have to pay attention to and include it in their programs for future lecturers, mentors, and trainers. So nobody gives us a formal idea, around these things, these issues. I think that's where we lag behind.
Yeah, I agree. And the first thing I might say is call the soft skills hard skills, and the hard soft skills
Absolutely.
Switch it up a little bit. Yeah, you're right. I trained in India for my medical school, and I think looking back, I actually learned a lot of behaviors that I shouldn't emulate rather than I should emulate. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Group 1. Group 2, who's reporting? Is it Morgan? You're muted.
Yes, I've made some notes so others can add. So some of the points that came through around fostering growth mindsets. How do we enhance this ability to foster growth mindset? So some of the points that came through was understanding one's personality and getting learners to understand their personality and using tools like Myers-Briggs types inventory, understanding learning styles, and we use the Honey and Mumford learning style inventory. And then the mention was made of allowing learners to make mistakes, and especially during the remote online training that occurred during the COVID pandemic, the mistakes were handled in a very non-confrontational manner, allowing learners to grow. Quite importantly, it was mentioned that it's too late to try to look at fostering a growth mindset in the postgraduate space. We should actually be focusing on the undergraduate, and perhaps even earlier. We need a new culture of learning. We should not be focusing on how to acquire knowledge, but how to manage knowledge. And more importantly, as Visva has mentioned, a focus on the softer skills, or some people call them the power skills, things like lifelong learning, and the ability to make sure that you're a lifelong learner, and the other CANMED competency. An important point was brought up was fostering peer-to-peer learning and group work, because it allows you to identify yourself through others. It promotes interpersonal skills and enhances the ability to manage diversity. And then I think Sudha mentioned that as a recent examiner for a national exam, she found that these questions tends to raise more issues than anything. And she focused on how do we train the trainers, because she experienced many examiners who had biases towards diversity, and how do we change the mindset of the trainers as well, which is also as important as the learner's mindset. So I don't know if anybody wants to add. Please feel free to do so.
I think both groups had really, really great points to share. And you're absolutely right. And I'm going to just show you one slide which encapsulate what all of you said, and particularly focusing on the growth mindset. So this came out of, it's on one of the 12 tips articles that I wrote at the end of my PhD dissertation. And so I felt that multiple stakeholders need to participate in fostering a feedback culture that targets a growth mindset. So from the feedback provider, that is, and as was said, not just teacher, it's anyone who provides feedback, establish a positive learning climate, let them feel safe, be a professional role model, observe performance, and don't go by, I heard, somebody said, but really observe the performance and play it back, like be a mirror, facilitate reflection and inform self-assessment. From the feedback receiver recipient side, they also should inculcate a growth mindset, recognize that failure is actually a good opportunity to learn and not shy away or be dishonest about their failure. encourage, they should be seeking feedback and initiate action plans for improvement and discuss it with their mentor, with their teacher, with their peer, or whoever the trusted person might be. For the relationship itself, we should focus, there's work on feedback, educational alliances between teachers and learners. And I think those of you in psychology, psychiatry, business know this very well. So partnering in this relationship, not top down, bottom up, no, just partnering. And for the, encouraging the teachers and learners to co-create learning opportunities, as you clearly said, during the pandemic, we actually took advice from our learners on certain issues, on virtual teaching and learning. And I think there's no reason that we can't extend it to other domains as well. And finally, from the institutional context, attend to learner self-efficacy, not just through praise, but then make sure we're not insulting or humiliating or disempowering them. Balance, do faculty development that to teach our trainers to balance supervision and autonomy. So give them freedom when they have earned it, but then supervise when they need it. Establish and demonstrate ourselves a continuous practice improvement mindset and foster a feedback culture that really targets professional growth, mutual professional growth. And that's all I had. And I think it pretty much summarizes what both groups said. And with that, we come to the end of today's session. And thank you all for attending, participating, and providing your own insights. Veena, yeah, done.
Thank you. Sorry, I didn't realize I was muted. Thank you so much, Subha. I mean, this is such a massive topic, and I think you've at least helped us to break this down into chunks that we can each go and implement in our way, in our environments, and also, also whet our appetite to go and read more about this. I'm actually very eager to go and read about Carol Dweck, and thank you very much for that. Colleagues, thank you so much for making time to join. We're going to have the last workshop. Well, actually, maybe we can have more. But the third workshop is scheduled for the 13th of June for the moment tentatively. And we're going to be exploring relationships and coaching principles, and a particular focus on the R2C2 framework. That's the next workshop that we will have with Subha. But thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it, and have a great evening. And thank you so much, Subha. We will chat more. Take care, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.